everyone, and welcome to the program, Midday Discourse on Global Television. I am Samuel Odi. Many thanks for joining on today's edition of the program. On today's edition of the program, we're looking at climate change and we'll be seeking measures to address flooding in Nigeria. Over a couple of years now, we've had a series of issues around flooding, which has been a major concern to Nigerian citizens, and we've seen reports, just the most recent that happened in Niger State, and Mocha has had recorded lots of deaths and rendered a whole lot of Nigerians homeless, and also businesses were also affected. This internal displaced persons now automatically has been challenged after this devastating incident that happened a couple of months ago, and they are still struggling to find a way to get on their feet. Looking at it from this angle now, palliative and other relief materials have been provided by state government, that's talking about Niger State. But still, how consistent will this be? How would Nigerians be able to, look back and say, okay, we don't have flooding issues anymore? We'll be looking at all of these concerns. We'll be having conversations on how this incidents will be tackled. We'll be looking at the causes contributing to this devastating challenges that we have always witnessed in Nigeria year in and year out. Just last year in Borno State, hundreds of lives and properties were damaged due to flooding. And now some persons in that part of the country are still yet to recover from that devastating incident. This year, again, we witnessed the same thing in Niger State, where it happened in Mocha, a local government in Niger States. A lot of individuals have lost their lives and still businesses displaced. We have a report around this by one of our correspondents, Kabir, who will bring us insights from a report around climate change and tackling of security challenges. Here are the reports.
Sahel, which spans across parts of West and Central Africa, has become a hotspot for insecurity, food shortages, and forced migrations. Nigeria, especially the northern region, remains a focal in this crisis. From shrinking farmland to terrorist violence, communities in Borno, Yobe, Zamfara, Katsina, and parts of Niger State are experiencing both climate-related and security emergencies. Speaking at the event, the Director General of the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, Dr. Joseph Ochogu, stated that climate change is worsening conflict and displacement in the Sahel, especially in Nigeria. He therefore called for urgent, inclusive, and preventive response through peace building, climate resilience, and youth empowerment. He aligned the theme of the seminar with President Tinubu's renewed hope agenda and appreciates support from partners like Friedrich Ebert Stephen.
As we deliberate today, please note also that we also align with President Tinubu's foreign policy doctrine, which is the 4D anchored on democracy, development, demography, and diaspora.
Ambassador Usman Serki, who was the guest speaker, emphasizes the need for collaboration with the government, highlighting ways to curb the menace.
Itself is a major player and stakeholder in the Sahel region. However, the sudden rupture and dramatic exit of these countries from the body will make it difficult, will make it doubtful if ECOWAS can have any significance in determining or shaping the course of events and developments in the central Sahel region.
Speaking to journalists, the guest speaker stressed the need to find a lasting solutions to the climate change, armed conflict, and internal displacement in the Sahel region.
My recommendation is for the Nigerian government to dedicate a special space for the study of the conflicts and situations in the Sahel region.
Stakeholders and participants express hope that efforts will move from discussion to actions aimed at building a peaceful, climate-resilient Sahel, where displacement and conflict no longer define the future. Hassan Kabir reporting for Global TV News.
Many thanks, Kabir, for that excellent report. So, climate is actually our friendly neighborhood, and having a well-secured environment actually is going to lead to a whole lot of infrastructural development and growth of the economy. We'll be going on a quick break, and then when we return back, we'll be having more conversation around climate change and seeking measures to address Nigerian flooding concerns. Stay with us. I'll be introducing my guest shortly after this break. Stay with us. Yes, many thanks for staying with us. Now we're about getting right into the conversation of the day of seeking measures to addressing flooding in Nigeria. Joining me live from Benin City, it's a communicator and a climate justice campaigner in the person of Babawali Oyebanju. Good afternoon, and many thanks for joining us on today's edition of Midday Discuss.
Thank you for inviting me here, and I hope I'm audible enough.
Yes, you're very audible. So, looking at it now, the current reality is now. Last year, we saw flooding ravaging almost the entire city of Borno State. Since still last year, we saw the same flooding incidents also affecting Lagos. Fast forward down to the year 2025, we've seen the same level of devastation happening in Mocha, that's talking about Niger State, where lives and properties have been taken by flood. So now we are looking at causes and factors that contribute to all of these this flooding that we've witnessed, and we're looking at how to address this major challenge because it affects businesses, it affects infrastructural development, and also the lives and citizens of Nigerians also are at stake. So now, my question to you, Mr. Baba Wale, is what are the major causes of flooding in Nigeria to start with? Let's start from there.
Okay, I think for a start, uh, flooding is induced because of several reasons, and one of the major ones would be the impact of the activities of humans on the planet. And what do I mean by that? Our activities as humans since the pre-industrial level, when we started investing a lot of energy and resources into fossil fuel production, has led to the increase in the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. And in turn, this has led to global warming, where you have the blanket that should be protecting the earth and protecting us from ultraviolet rays and the harmful rays coming from the skies has become plugged with CO2 and other greenhouse gases. And this has led to the warming of the atmosphere. And in turn, this is leading to sea level rise, this is leading to other catastrophic activities. And the increase in sea level rise, the increase in rains, rainfall across are some of the reasons why you have more flooding because the amount of discharge is compared to the amount of recharge. When you talk about the water that goes up and the water that comes down, is not commensurate anymore. So you have more water coming down in the form of rain, impacting other places and flooding the environment. You have the sea level rising. So when there's need to, for example, now over the weekend, those flying Benin to Lagos, many could not get to Lagos on Friday night, Saturday morning, because they are ahead of their river overflowed its bank across the bridge. So things like this are going to happen because of human induced activity. And to make this also worse, our building code, our mode of building in Nigeria in particular is something that is worrisome. Because I know in many areas, the town planners have exact plans of how areas should be, where there should be drainage pathways, where there should be flood water passing, where there should be storage. What we have seen over time is people disobeying this lay down principle and those who should be enforcing are not enforcing. So people are built on drainage pathways, people are built on floodplains, and you are seeing this impact coming straight at our homes and our family. But in the northern region where you have a lot of this desertification happening and dry land and arid land, and like you see, where you have bare empty land without plants, where you don't have anything to stop water from flowing, you're going to have devastating impact and the list goes on and on. So, but the major culprit of all of this is human activities resulting from our extraction of fossil fuel, crude oil, gas, and coal in particular are the major culprits.
Having with this foundation being laid now, let's look at climate change and the extreme weather events. What role do they play in celebrating flooding in Nigeria, and how can it be mitigated?
Yeah, so the more oil and gas coal that we look for, it is many of the plights of many of our African leaders because some of them have argued that the West have developed their own fossil fuel. Why would Africa be allowed to develop using their own fossil fuel? But the reality of it is the carbon budget that we have at the moment, if we decide to extract for this oil and gas coal, the impact will be devastating on us. It's already devastating already because already at the moment the temperature is rising faster, double the amount over the past couple of decades. And each year there's been several increments in the warming of the earth. And this is as a result of the impact of man's activity, especially in the extraction of fossil fuel, crude oil, gas, and coal. So these are major culprits. So this is what is impacting climate change and resulting in different devastations we see across the world. And currently, a report came out last week that said at the moment we only have between 2 to 3 years to meet the 1.5 degree benchmark that was issued in and agreed upon in Kyoto and agreed upon also in Paris. That if we continue at this pace of extraction, where we're already extracting beyond the limit with what science have said we should keep in the ground and should stop extracting, if we continue at this level that we are in, of a shortage, the climate impact are going to increase. Currently, we have at the moment about 40 billion tons of carbon is released yearly by the impact of our activities as humans. And with this trend, we have the remaining carbon budget, according to science, is about 130 billion tons left to reach that 1.5 degree mark beyond pre-industrial level. So if we continue at this pace of 40 billion tons of carbon a year, we only have barely 3 years. And what this means, if there is an increase in temperature in the global north, somewhere in the global north, say by 1 degree centigrade, in Africa for us here and those in the global south, that means 2.0, 2.1, almost 3. And what that means in turn is the sea is going to get warmer because as the environment gets warmer, and we already experiencing a lot of heat, as the heat gets warmer, as the environment gets warmer, that heat has to find a place to stay. And where does it land? In the sea. And when this happens at the sea, there's increase in the sea level. So that results, that generally is going to result to more water coming out beyond its bank and flowing to the community. And when you have high precipitation, where the heat becomes too much, water is evaporating, the rain will have to come down. And this will in turn lead to more flooding. So all of these activities are things that we need to check if we want to stop flooding, if we want to prevent it from expanding beyond what it is now, and if we want to stop all that climatic impact affecting humans, affecting not just people in the global south, but all of us globally. We're already seeing the ice caps are melting, the sea level is rising, floods everywhere, there's drought in some regions, and this whole thing is continuing, but it's all as a result of the activities of humans. And if we want to make our earth dwellable for us, we need to take a halt on many of these actions to help us preserve our land, preserve nature, and preserve humans.
What measures now? What measures can humans take? You rightly mentioned earlier before now that humans contribute to flooding, human activities. Now, what measures can be taken still by humans to help curtail these negativities though that is looking to unfold if measures are not taken? So what can be done by NIMET and Ministry of Environment to help curtail this incidents from happening?
NIMET's role in this matter is what they've been trying to do, to read the weather patterns, the weather changes and everything. And they've been trying their best to do that and giving warning, which is their own role. But that is not enough because we have seen different, okay, for example, in 2012, when things began to impact more places than it used to be, when we saw the flood ravaging the whole of the country. And since 2012 till now, we've been seeing different degrees of that impact coming across. And NIMET has been doing their own bit to announce ahead of time that there will be flooding, everybody get ready, blah, blah, blah. It's one thing to announce. It's another thing for you to be prepared for the impacts when they come. The other thing is, for these floods, it's just like you have a bath in your bathroom at home, and you open up the tap, the water faucet, and water is coming out, gushing, fill the bath, and it's overflowing the bath. The only sensible thing to do, instead of getting to go and buy the most sophisticated mop stick or buy the most sophisticated bucket or whatever, the most sensible thing to do at the moment is to close that tap faucet, to close that tap, to shut it down. When you shut it down, it will stop flowing water and you stop having overflow in your house. So the simple thing that we should be thinking about doing at the moment is to stop, to reduce, to limit the extraction of fossil fuel. We start thinking about a new form of energy. Because in reality, new forms of energy are here that are safer, that are cleaner in the form of the renewable energy that every one of us knows is cleaner than fossil fuel. So we need to start thinking about leaving new fossil fuel in the ground. That's the first step to take. While we are trying to transit justly from the existing ones to newer, cleaner energy sources. That's the first thing to do. That's the first thing to do. Then on the secondary level or the tertiary level that we will talk about is, for example, for us in Nigeria, where people don't obey building laws, where people don't respect the building plans of communities of regions, we have to take this into cognizance. Those in charge of implementation have to implement. Any house on the drainage path should be brought down. No one should build on those paths where water should flow naturally. Because if we keep at this, when this floods, and the flood is going to continue if man doesn't stop extracting for fossil fuel, we're going to experience more and more flooding. But if we are not prepared for it, by building accurately and appropriately in our communities, we're going to have the impact of oil and flooding, impacting our homes, properties destroyed, lives destroyed, and the lives will continue. And the other thing is our management of our waste is also another thing. Because, for example, in big cities like in Benin City, in Lagos, and Abuja, the way we treat our waste is another big issue that we need to consider, and especially with respect to plastics. Because plastics also is also a fallout and offshoot of fossil fuel. We also need to think about the use of plastic and how we dump it. If you look into the drains across the city, I'm sure in Abuja where you are, check the drains and see. It's laden with plastic bottles, sachet water bags, nylon bags from the market. All of this is contributing. So we need to also think about how we use plastic, how we produce them, and how we manage them. These are part of the issue that we need to look at. So the list goes on, and we need to think about it collectively, supporting NIMET. NIMET is doing their part. The implementers should also do their part, while the government also does their part to make sure that they have signed and they said their NDC, they want to reduce the greenhouse gas emission in the country by 2030, by 2050, by 2060, by XYZ percentage. All of this will not happen if we keep extracting and looking for new oil wells. So we need to start leading by example and putting action to the words of our mouth. If the government really wants things to be better, they have to stop exploiting for new oil and gas while thinking about transiting justly from the existing ones into cleaner forms of energy.
Conversation around renewable energy. But now you made mention of plastics and sachet nylons. How can recycling, now what role can recycling play in terms of curtailing flooding, like you rightly mentioned? Truly, we've seen reports that's where we've seen plastic rubbers and sachet nylons on the sea level, even in Lagos and also some parts of Nigeria as well. So what role can recycling play in helping to curtail most of this flooding?
I think the first point of call is a change in habits. We need to change our relations with plastic. I always like to use an example. When I was growing up, plastic was a very strange thing to me. It was more bottle. If you're going, for example, to a restaurant you want to indulge and get some food or whatever from a restaurant, you go with your cooler, you go with your plate. But now what do we see? We go to the restaurant, we tell them to put the food in a plastic pack and also ask them to give us a nylon bag. So each day we go to a restaurant, we come back with one plastic pack, the cover and the pack, a plastic spoon and a plastic bag. Where does this end up? In the trash. And the trash doesn't end up in a good waste management system. It ends up most likely on the streets, in the gutters, or somewhere that's going to be causing menace for us. A person goes to the market, for example. An average person who goes to the market, a man or a woman who goes to the market, they come back home with a minimum of 11 plastic bags, a minimum of 11 plastic bags. Where do all of this end up? Either in the waste bin, in the gutters, or somewhere that is not properly managed. The list goes on and on. Now you see all the companies who are making beverages, they are all migrating from plastic, from bottles to plastic containers. Those who are, we have more, what do you call it? Water producing, water factories emerging everywhere, creating more plastics, plastic bottles, sachet containers, and all of this. Why is this? When I was growing up, also we have We had public water system. So I just have to go to school with my water bottle. If the water is done, I go to the school tap, put my water can in the tap, fetch the water, and I'm going to drink it. But now those things are no longer on the street. So people have issues with accessing clean water on their ways because definitely because the heat is increasing, people want to drink more water. Even if you have a can of water from home, I bet you before the end of the day, the water is gone even before 2 hours of your arrival at work. So you need more water to drink. So we need to think about our relation to plastic and our mindset with respect to plastic because it starts from there. Then those who are producing this plastic, there needs to be a regulation that if you produce this amount of plastic, you should be able to retrieve those plastics from the community, recycle them and reuse them. Because now the responsibility lies in the hands of citizens, not in the hands of the producer. So if everybody keeps buying, for example, a particular brand of water in a plastic container or in a plastic sachet, or a particular brand of beverage in a bottle or whatever, the onus lies on in the hands of the citizens, not in the producers, because the producers have really exempted themselves from this process. It shouldn't be. If you are producing this amount of plastic containers every day into the system, there should also be a system for you to be retrieving your containers back to yourself and reusing them. So these are some of the things that needs to be put in place to make sure that because when people become responsible, they know that it's going to cost them money to get back their plastic containers to recycle them. We will have a rethink on how to use plastics. And we have seen already some in some states across Lagos, they are trying to put a ban on the use of single use plastics in supermarkets, restaurants, in the marketplaces, and everything. So this is going to increase with time. So people need to start thinking about how to make this better and think about the environment more. Yeah, so we need to get back to the place where you have bags, you have coolers, you have bottle use instead of plastic containers and the like. So we have to really think it all begins from a mindset change, and that's where it all starts from.
Economy because the SMEs in the rural communities most of the times contributes more to the to Nigerian GDP. Let's look at how flooding affects agricultural businesses and also local economy because if we keep having these incidents year in and year out, like we've been witnessing all of this devastation since 2012. Now, it's over a decade now that this has been consistent. How would this now affect Nigerian economy in the long run based on the fact that the SMEs, which are the major drivers of Nigerian GDP, are being affected? So what can be done by the government now to mitigate this?
Um, First of all, like you said, yeah, the smallholder farmers actually are the ones, for example, in the food system that actually feed the world. Several studies have proven that. But we are also seeing the huge change in the weather pattern. And many of these smallholder farmers depend on the weather. Like for example, those who depend on rainfall to plant, or those who depend on the rainfall to water their plants to get to harvest. There are a lot of them in the system. And when you're having two crises here, one is the increase in heat temperature, the increase in heat around heating of the earth, heating of the environment, and also the impact when it comes when the rains begins to fall. That impact also. So now you have sometimes you can't predict the weather anymore. So these guys who depend on who could tell you before that in April I could plant XYZ and in July I could harvest XYZ. Now because of the change in weather pattern, they can't have that prediction anymore. So what government can help do, like they used to do before, is to invest more in what they call this agricultural people now that go around to educate um, um, farmers and the like. Yes, I forgot what they call them. So, anyways, the agricultural guys, extension workers. Exactly. I remember now. Thank you. Extension workers. So they need to invest more in getting more extension workers into the field who would help these farmers be able to like do a 5 year analysis. Okay, what has changed in 5 years? When did the rains fall in January 2022? When did the rains fall in January 2023? What changed? So this can help them at least prepare. And also there is need for them, these extension workers, to also work hand in hand with the agricultural producers, for example, to be able to preserve their seeds and not introduce genetically modified seeds into the system. Because now we are seeing an influx of this. For example, I bought some oranges 4 weeks ago. It stayed in my house for 3 weeks and it did not rot. How can you buy oranges 3 weeks? Because I traveled in between and came back. 3 weeks, the orange was sitting down in my kitchen. Instead of rotting, it was shrinking, it was drying up. That is very strange. Oranges naturally, after some hours or some days in your house, it begins to rot. But this is not the case. You have tomato that can have 3 months shelf life. That is so. But if our indigenous seed that we used to have, there's need to preserve them. So there's need for extension workers, agric extension workers to be invested in, invest in the agric extension worker program, get more of them to the space to work with the farmers already, so they can help mitigate and prevent this impact that we have definitely be coming. And if we do nothing to stop or reduce the amount of fossil fuel we are producing. So that is one on the one side. So the other side is the government has to also provide some incentive. I know they've been trying their best, but they need to do more. We need to invest in agroecology, which is what these our farmers have been used to for a long time. We need to create more resource for them, provide soft loans for them. Yeah, the government have been doing their bit with that, but they need to do more. We can't say they're not doing their bit. We know several regimes have tried to do their own part, but they need to do more. There needs to be more investment in agroecology. There needs to be a reduction in the policies they signed to introduce GM seeds, GM crops into our nation. That has to be done because if we don't do organic, aside the impacts in our farms, health wise also, we're going to be having disaster in our health. We're already seeing that already with several strange sicknesses happening around where we cannot even trace where they're coming from. So all of this has to be so there's need to be a collaboration. There needs to be a collaboration between the agricultural system, the government, and the people. And also, um, there needs to be we need to get more farmers actually. Many of the people in the rural communities are already running away from the communities because of one. Some of them have had header farmer clashes. The government needs to do more to secure our farmers and secure our farms. Aside the impacts of flooding, aside the impacts of heat, there's also this impact coming from the clash between the headers and the farmers. The government needs to put action to this activity and reduce and stop these activities of this impact of farmer header clashes that is also impacting on our food system. Because if this is not done, just imagine a farmer can't go to farm because one, heat is disturbing his production, rain is disturbing his production. And now to add to that, when he's able to even go to the farm, there's a clash, there's kidnapping. All of this has to be put in. The government has to do more. And we know citizens are trying their best to support the government, but we need more of this. There's need for more action to help preserve. Because if nothing is done, hunger looms, and who knows who will be able to survive all of that.
We go on a very quick break. Let's look at urban planning because real estate development now is taking over the entire country. So how can urban planning now and design help mitigate those effects of flooding?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, like for example, the community where I live. When we came to that community some years ago, we're given a plan. We're shown a plan of this is how the community is. This is where you're supposed to build. After every 200 feet plot of land, there's supposed to be a road that connects. But now you can't find those roads because those roads, aside being access point of connectivity, also act as places where water can flow through, and you can have ease of movement of water and humans. But now what we have seen happening is people don't even consider these things. They just build, provided it's fine, it's beautiful, and this also is impacting. It's going to affect. So there's need for the urban planners, the city developers to work hand in hand and ensure that for every estate that is being developed, they keep to the rules and the regulation of the urban plan. And the urban planners in themselves will also have to work hand in hand to ensure that every one of these estate developers abide by the town planning rules. Secondly, we also begin to develop a concrete village. Now everybody wants to have interlock in their compound. Nobody's thinking about trees. Nobody's thinking about grasses. Nobody's thinking about living bare lands. And if we have a concrete jungle, like okay, they want to compare themselves with Dubai. Dubai is a desert. Now they're trying to have artificial rain. You have rains, but you want to be like Dubai. You are concrete. You go into an estate, for example, every every room, every space in that estate is either interlocked or cemented. They don't have trees, they don't have grass, they don't have playground, they don't Where will the water, when the water comes down, where will it go to? So there's need for us to also consider our habitations. We need to go back to the times where we had trees on our streets, where compound had grasses in their compound, where compound had just normal sand that you can sweep every day. I remember I went to a community somewhere in Akwa Ibom State. My God, I had to ask them in the community, do you go sweep this village every day? Because they didn't have interlock nowhere, they didn't have concrete anywhere. It was just sand and it was very, very neat. They could manage it, and I'm not sure those guys had terrible impact of flooding or they've had that kind of impact of because the ground is there to receive the water and take it in. So water flows, comes from the rain, it percolates the soil, and it reduces the amount of runoff that you're going to experience in the community. But with our new crave for having interlock floors, having cemented floors, we are going to have more flooding as the estates develop. So there's need for the town planners to enforce that for every building, yes, we might have some part of the building interlock, but there should be spaces in the compound that is bare ground, sand. There should be spaces in the compound that has grasses, that has trees, that has some form of plants in the compound. So all of these things would add. And secondly, or thirdly, or fourthly, because I mentioned many things, the architectural design. Our weather, the weather is the weather patterns are changing, is changing rapidly. More heat is coming. Now you see people building houses with tiny windows in their houses. How many people can afford air conditioning with the band A, the band C, and the band D, and the band Z? How many people can actually afford to turn on their air conditioning in their sitting room, in their bedroom, in their whatever space they have in the house? But our old architecture that we had before, where you had the louver blade or wide windows, was actually putting into cognizance where we live. So houses were built in time past based on the weather pattern of where we are living. Those in the cold region have tiny windows because the tiny windows will help keep the cold out and make the house warm. We are in the tropic regions where we have more heat than cold. So you need open windows, big windows that will allow air coming and reduce the amount of electricity consumption that you'll be needing, the amount of heating or warming devices that you need in your home. So we need also the architect needs to also think about this. We need to build according to where we are located, and don't just copy what you see on the internet or what you see when you travel. Look at where you are, look at what is situated for you, and abide by it. So these are some. There are many more things that we'll just stop here for time.
Continue this conversation, Baba Wale, immediately after this break. Please do stay with us. Yes, many thanks for joining us. If you just joined, this is Midday Discuss, and we're having conversations around climate change and seeking measures to addressing flooding in Nigeria. I have joining me virtually from Benin City, Babawale, who has been doing justice to the subject matter. Babawale, still, there are lots of warnings that we've seen this year by NIMET, and just the most recent from today, they mentioned there will be a mixture of sun and cloudy weather here in Nigeria. So now tell me, how do you think Nigerians should prepare, and get themselves ready ahead of, the coming week? Just this past weekend, like you rightly mentioned earlier, commuters couldn't get through to Lagos based on the massive flooding that was witnessed in Ogun State, though the government of Ogun State says it's normal that happens with raining season. Do you think, my questions for you now, do you think that is normal? And secondly, how do you think Nigerians should get themselves ready based on the warnings that NIMET released this morning?
Yeah. That conversation of being normal, I don't think it's normal. There's nothing normal about that. Because when the bridges were constructed, the bridges were way, way, way higher than where the water level was. And if there was, I don't think any scientist or any engineer in their right thinking faculty or right thinking place would definitely put a bridge at the same level as the water. They put the bridge higher than the water. So no matter what level the water rises to, it doesn't get to the bridge. But because of this impact of climate change, the water now is exceeding that level. So it's not normal. So there's nobody that will tell me or that would say that is normal. That's an abnormal situation. Just imagine you driving through 10 million bridge and you see the water from the sea that used to be far, far down is now at the same level as 12 million bridge. What would you do? That is not normal. So it's not normal. So there's no government that should say that is normal. It's not normal. But in ideal sense, when announcements like this are made, the first question is, yeah, NIMET is doing their best to announce. But how many people actually heard about the NIMET announcement? Is the other question they're going to ask. How were they able to reach people? How many people watch television? How many people have access to power to even see the TV or to listen to the radio? So the NIMET has to do more than they are doing already. They have to invest more in a space where naturally at this time and age, people spend a lot of their time, social media. They have to do more work on social media to do more publicity to make people aware and be prepared for this coming flood and heat that is already been announced. In the UK, for example, they are already making preparation. In the metro stations, they're already putting things in place to make, because the weather is going to be, they've already predicted that they're going to have very warm summer. So there's already preparation to increase temperature in their metro stations, to increase temperature and the coolness, when I mean temperature, to make it cooler for the metropolitan spaces, people who are going through the metro, people who are using the buses, people who are walking on the street. They're already putting this in place to make the environment cooler for them. So the same thing should be the impression of our government. If there's an announcement that we're going to have more heat, what is the government putting in place? What support is the government putting in place to support citizens so that we don't begin to have heat-induced deaths on the street or heat-induced sickness in our communities? What is the government putting in place? Are we supporting schools to have more air conditioning in their system or to have more fan system? Which is also bringing us back to where I was talking about the architecture. Are they enforcing that all schools, all business places should have specific kind of windows, specific kind of doors, specific kind of heating or cooling environments? These are the things that should be discussed and be implemented, excuse me. So this has to be considered when such announcements are made. And for example, if you are going to announce that for the roads to Lagos, so for example, you say Via River is going to overflow this back. Would there be another? There should be alternative preparation. Okay, can we make boats available so that when you get to Via River that is overflowing this bank, you can find a way into a boat and cross over and continue your journey, because the overflow that happens doesn't take over the whole stretch of the road. It takes over a portion of the road. Can there be arrangement to have boats to help people commute and move faster from one destination to the other? Is it possible to just so there has to be some level of preparedness? Not the announcement that people who are living in low lying areas should move to higher places. When this movement is happening, how will a man whose whole life is in the valley has no place on the hill? How will he move his stuff up the hill in preparation for the rains? Where is he going to commute to? So all of these are some things that we need to consider in this process. The government needs to put things in place If you want people to move from a low level place, low lying level area to higher altitude, you have to put in place some measures to help them migrate from these low level areas to high level areas to their safety. And to also make sure that, okay, those who are in the dangerous position, because you have seen over the course of the years that those people who are in the valley are always prone to this flood. Why not find a way to relocate them and ensure that there's nobody in those low lying areas? But we don't think about that all the time. Just make the announcement and leave them. Everybody get low level line, low level areas. Move your things and go to the high. Who's going to get the cost? How are they going to move? When we were building there was nobody to enforce that they should not build there. They left them to build there. Now they have built there. The flood is coming. They ask them to move. So the government needs to find a way to either help support the relocation or ensure that nobody builds in those areas that will prone to flood. That's some of the things that we need to do. Then there's need for us to consider our waste management system. I kind of want to emphasize that we don't manage our waste properly. The amount of waste we generate every day in our homes, it's not commensurate to how we are managing or how we are recycling. There's need for policies to help us manage this waste, our waste that we generate in the house, and there's need for a change in attitude.
Baba Wale, as we round up, what do you think is the major causes of this flooding? Do you think it's implementation of policies that is a major concern, the fact that Nigerians don't pay attention to policies, or does bodies in charge that sees that these policies get fully implemented, not following through? Do you think those are the major causes of policies aside the natural causes that we can't, totally have control over?
Um, we are not in short of or in shortage of policies. There are many beautiful policies that we have enacted, we have ratified, we've signed on to, we have agreed upon, several of them. Nigeria is not in shortage of any of those policies. We have them enacted. But the point is the implementation of those policies are the major obstacle. A government that says they want to reduce their emission of CO2 by 40%, 30% before 2030 under because they put that scenario where they get support from either the global north to help transit or conditional reduction of CO2 or unconditional. The government now is busy looking for new oil fields. The government now is trying to open new oil wells. All of that process is negating the ratification of documents or policies that you have already done in time past. So if you want to put action to your word, you have to start from the action point. Don't open new oil fields. The ones that are already open, ensure that there's a plan to transition. Start facing it out while transiting to clean renewable energy. All of these policies have to be implemented. But we're not in shortage of policies in the country. We're just in shortage of implementation or the will to implement these policies. And because until we reduce the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, the climate change impact is going to increase. There's no going back on that. And there's no coming back. So we have to decisively do that change. And also, like I mentioned, we also have to start thinking about the change in attitude. We have to change our mindset, which is a secondary or tertiary part. The major primary thing that we should be considering in this whole process, maybe the oil in the soil, the coal in the coal, the tar in the land, while we transit and change towards the other.
So much, Baba Wale Obayonju, a commentator and a climate justice campaigner. Thank you so much for taking our time to join us on Midday Discuss today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me. Happy to do.
You too. And that's how much time will permit us to take on today's edition of Midday Discuss. Protecting and keeping our environment safe and clean actually starts from us. So you all should take measures to protecting and also creating pathways as you build for drainage systems, so as whenever it rains very heavily, there will be a pathway for the rain to pass. My name is Samuel Odi, and many thanks for joining us on today's edition of Midday Discuss. I'll see you again as we discuss something more. Bye for now.